This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by Corporate Board Member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and it's always a pleasure to be in December, doing our shows in December, because it gives us the opportunity to invite back good friends, contributors, and gives us the opportunity to look both back into the year that's been and the year looking forward. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a look at sort of the governance topics that are key for people to pay attention to in 2013. And joining me for this show are two very familiar faces, contributors along the way to what's happening. They actually have their own shows as well, IR Today and Governance Minutes. So let me introduce those. To my immediate left here is Jeff Morgan, who's the president and CEO of the National Investor Relations Institute, which is called NIRI. And Jeff is the host on IR Today, so welcome.
Thanks.
And to his left is Ken Bertsch, who's the president and CEO of the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals, co-host of Governance Minutes, again, shot here at the Exchange. Right. And so, gentlemen, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, TK.
Great to be here.
Well, our job, there is so much for us to talk about today that we're going to break it into two parts, okay, so that we make sure that we don't make either show too long, but it's real inviting and a cast of thousands. So I think the place that only makes sense to start, though, is the issue that setting sort of the stage, for 2013. So we just got done with an election, which everybody was very curious about, very anxious to see, because it really meant some significant changes depending on which way it went. So now we know that. And then we see Chairman Shapiro, announcing that she's stepping down, and Elise Walter coming in. So let's start with that. Let's talk a little bit about what that means and what sort of the environment is. And Ken, I'll start with you on that.
Sure. Well, so the most obvious thing is that there's, for the moment, a 2-2 deadlock at the SEC. Still a fair amount of Dodd-Frank work to be done, work on other regulations, including some of the Jobs Act. So given that, and given that there's been partisan difference, so 2-2, I mean 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, given that there have been significant partisan differences, I think there's an expectation that some issues may be on hold for the time being. Including from Dodd-Frank, we have what's been called the Gang of Four, 4 disclosure compensation-related items, including the pay ratio between CEO and median worker, the hedging policy, clawbacks, pay for performance. Those, at least those that there can't be some agreement, cross-party agreement, nothing much is going to happen soon. So we'll see. It's hard to know whether Elise Walter, how long she'll be there. They did not use interim in her title, which is interesting, but she seems to be giving signals, and the administration seems to have given signals that she will be gone by the end of her term at the end of 2013. So we'll see.
Jeff, anything to add?
Well, I'm going to add on to what Ken said and maybe look at it a little bit differently. I think the key here is that usually you have 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans because the president is a Democrat. And whoever won the election, there was going to be changes in Washington, not just at the commissioner level, but I think more as important was the changes that we're starting to see at the director level. We've seen Meredith Cross leave, who was head of Corp Fin. We've seen Director of Trading and Markets go, General Counsel go, and there may be more. So there is changes both at the commissioner level and at the staff level, and I think what we will see is how quickly the new staff will be brought in, and how quickly, as Ken said, we'll see an appointment or a change in the leadership. I think the key here is that it's a 2-2 vote now. You have 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and I think for Elise Walter's standpoint, I don't think she's going into this job with, I'm going to sit on my hands until my term is done. I think she's going to want to do some things. So I think we may see more activity. And the way politics work in Washington, who knows how long it will take to appoint her replacement or appoint the next chair. So I think we may see more done there than everybody's expecting.
Well, and I'm not sure what everybody was expecting, because none of this stuff has moved very quickly. That's been part of the criticism, I think, is that, these stuff's been passed and not much has happened. I would guess that businesses sort of maybe are not unhappy about some of that. They'd like to see some of that, particularly the compensation ratio and some of that stuff debated, maybe a little longer, because there was some pretty strong opposition to that part of what came out of Dodd-Frank. But so, and we'll have to see, again, there was some discussion about Shapiro being, not there for a long time. And certainly she was active, and, again, maybe not her own agenda, but an agenda that was there. And probably Elise is going to be in a similar situation. Yeah,
and I would say I think that's why things have taken longer, is that most of what the agenda has been for the last 4 years at the SEC has been mandated down by Congress. So it's not stuff that is percolated up from the SEC, and therefore they have their ideas and concepts in place before it comes out. It's stuff that is percolated down, and it takes them longer to go through the process.
Well, and with a difficult statute in some ways
absolutely.
to implement.
Well, we wanted to use this time to talk about what lies ahead in 2013. So, and Jeff, I'll start with you on that. This is, there's got to be things that the board, needs to sort of focus on in 2013. That's a governance topic. So why don't you start off, and then I'll let Ken add.
Sure. I think on small companies' side, for small reporting companies, say on pay is going to be new for them. They were held off in the beginning, so that is going to be a new concept. And because it's smaller reporting companies, they don't have the sophistication of larger companies. So I think there's going to be a learning process, and hopefully they've been watching everybody. I think for larger companies, say on pay has been the issue and continues to be the issue, but I'm there watching proxy access. And I wonder if some of the activists have maybe felt like they haven't got enough inertia with say on pay, so they're going to go back to proxy access as a tool to create change in companies. So I think we may see more of that.
So I'd say the one overarching issue will continue to be executive pay. If you want to find one topic, I think there's more to work through on say on pay. One person in the UK who has experience with this, when the Dodd-Frank rule went ahead, said he thought it was a 5-year process, and it's probably longer than that. 5 year to work out the modus operandi between shareholders and companies, to get really everybody up their game to understand compensation and to do better. And I think actually shareholders are understanding better what's going on. So, but I think that continues to be the major issue. There are some other subsidiary issues I'd identify, or different issues, including proxy access. Although we're not hearing a lot yet as of today, and this is probably dangerous because this will be on the air for a while. But as of this day, when we're speaking, we're not hearing a lot of resolutions out there on the topic. But the votes last year on proxy access were high. I thought surprisingly high, higher than I would have expected. So it does seem like that's going to be coming back in one form or another. And then social environmental issues. We had talked last year about the Occupy Wall Street. That had a limited direct effect during the course of 2012, I think, on corporations, maybe a bigger indirect effect. But we're seeing some turbulence among social investors on several levels on environmental issues, and what are the appropriate standards and how best to push those and advocate for those. Hearing from campuses a little bit of talk of divestment around global warming. So these are differences, and it's likely to give some new spur to that side of the spectrum.
Yeah, we haven't seen a whole lot of traction, in those social, environmental kind of issues, but they certainly still make noise. And we saw that today or recently with the political spending, last year. But again, those votes fell very flat. There really wasn't much support when it came to the shareholders on the individual companies. But the three of us were talking about one thing that I think is important to bring out, and that's performance. That one of the reasons that some of these say on pay, they did well last year and all of a sudden they found themselves failing this year. It really is, in the end, performance is a big issue in this whole mix, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can't just assume that because you have flying colors and get a positive 1 year, that we just don't have to pay attention to that anymore. You got to continue to engage your shareholders and have that conversation.
Yeah. In part two, we'll talk about that shareholders' communication a little bit. But I'd like to ask you guys, there's another issue. It's one of my favorite issues, and that's the sort of proxy mechanics. And I'm hoping that I'm still host of the show, some year when this stuff gets finally taken care of. It was introduced in July of 2010. Strong reaction from businesses writing in, a lot of letters, a lot of things happened, relative to this. And then, we've just been sort of puttering along on that. So, Jeff and then Ken, you can follow up. What's the status of proxy mechanics?
This is
plumbing, I guess.
Proxy plumbing. This is where the SEC wanted to make some changes, and we've not seen action on the SEC level, but there's been action on the private sector side. End-to-end vote confirmation is an area that's got some changes in the works we're going to solve that. Proxy fees. There's a proposal that we expect to go from NYSE, which is the regulator of this, to the SEC for approval, that will look at proxy fees. And within there, we're hoping to see some things that improve retail engagement, as well as look at stratifying the NOBO list to allow us to get shorter lists. And then finally, proxy advisors. The SEC has said, who knows when we'll see it, but they're going to put out interpretive guidance on trying to give some rules to the road for proxy advisors.
I know this is something, Ken, that your group has been close to as well.
Well, so Jeff is right. There actually is some progress going on, and partly it's vote confirmation, so that both investors and issuers can have confidence the votes are getting through in the right way. But on a proxy advisor, I do expect, even though the people who have indicated that the SEC will act really are Mary Shapiro and Meredith Cross, both of whom are leaving, I nevertheless expect that they will do something. I don't expect it'll mean very much. So people shouldn't get their hopes up about that.
The mass letter writing campaigns are not going to have wholesale change.
I don't think so. However, the SEC has stressed that the proxy advisors are currently under anti-fraud rules, and that there are certain subjects that can be brought up with them. And that sounds very harsh, but that gives the SEC a little bit of license to talk in general about their processes, making sure there's some rigor and so on. And so, and we've seen some signs that the SEC is actually already talking to the proxy services. That may be more important.
Yeah. And again, I think that has made them aware that I think we've seen at least some thought of changes there, just to sort of preempt, what might happen. So that can only be a good thing.
Right.
Well, my prediction was true that we would shoot through our time very quickly. So that's the reason we're doing a part 1 and a part 2. So with that will conclude part 1, and I can almost ask you guys to stay in your seat, because we're going to wrap this show up and then swing into part 2, which will follow in the subsequent week. So with that will conclude this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. We hope you join part 1. Please join us for part 2. That'll follow next week. And we'll do everything we can to help you be a better board member and committee member. And we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by Corporate Board Member and host NYSE Euronext, along with Governance Knowledge Partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.